Okay, welcome back to Verity Seeker. This is episode number 2. We're here talking with my special guest, Dr. Cynthia Cara Polsley, who in our previous episode talked about her life experience. And this episode, we're going to discuss your projects, which you have a 3-book series that, from my perspective, is quite unique. May I use that term?
I hope it is.
It is very unique. I think one of its kind, because there's a lot of aspects mixed up into this literature that you've started. And it's a 3-book series. I think I mentioned that already. And the first book is titled Ifscapes, which actually is on each of the books, Ifscapes. And I am going to ask you what you mean by that. But the first title is Ifscapes, Empires and Androids, a collection of metamyth and science fiction inspired by the ancient world. Now think about that for a second. That is unique. And yes, I did start the series, and I'm in the first one, and I made it through about 4 chapters, and I was intrigued by this. It is different, and I think if people will read these, they will find that they've got something that hasn't been done before, as far as I can tell. So let me get to the first question on this. Okay, Ifscapes. What in the world do you mean by that?
Okay, so a landscape where you can see all about a panorama of the land.
Right.
There is the phrase timescapes, which I'm fond of using, which shows time spread out as a panorama. And Ifscapes comes out of my research, my dissertation work on conditionals, which have to do with if, and I'm sure we'll be talking more about that. But the idea is that this is a whole scape, if you will, a landscape, a panorama of all these ifs. I like to call it a multiverse of ifs.
Okay. What I found out in reading, let me check my notes here. When I started reading the first book, what did I get here? I've got it. Okay, if you read the table of contents, what I found funny from the very beginning is you titled your first chapter, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to Rome.
To the Empire.
To the
yes.
Empire. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm thinking Roman Empire, but yeah, Empire. I'm a musician, and I conducted pit orchestras and played instruments in pit orchestras. Well, there's a musical titled A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum.
Yes.
And it's hilarious. It's written by Stephen Sondheim, and very good musical. And when I saw that title, I'm going, is she making a connection with the musical? Or what? Is there a connection? Is it a joke or?
It is a joke. There is satire woven throughout those. If you do mythology, or if you do languages, or if you just like classic science fiction, right, there are a lot of Easter eggs in there. Okay. Never anything that's, no copyright infringement Easter eggs, but references like just what you talked about.
Yeah, I thought that was funny. And yes, the storyline is very interesting to read, and it is a lot of fun. You've created sectional groups, basically, is the way when I was reading this, I was seeing sectional groups. What are they called here? Antiquaries, which are the old realm, the people from the old era, the antiquity.
In story number 1.
They're not modern. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's in the first one. They rely on lower technologies. You have security bots, Roman legionaries. Okay, yes. So you're really crossing over, and you have this depot where people from these different realms and eras can actually congregate in the same place. Is that correct?
Story 1, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Empire.
Yes.
It has the chrono commute. So you have a chrono commuter train that will come to this depot with a city that it has antiquary sections and modern sections. So it is a good example of a lot of the things that Ifscapes will be looking at throughout the series, because time and space and these characters, all these ideas can come together. And exactly the effect that you're talking about should be what I hope each reader has, where it's got a modern place for you to be looking to, and also just engaging tons of questions.
Wow. Yeah, it was all over the place. I mean, in my mind, of course, I'm a very visual person, and it was complex. Honestly, it was complex, but it was a lot of fun because you had all these things going on at the same time and interacting with each other. But yeah, I would encourage, I don't want to, obviously I haven't made it through the book and I don't want to give too much away, but since I haven't made it all the way through this first one, is there any way that you can tell the audience out there to maybe kind of just entice them a little bit, give them a summary of what's going on throughout this whole first book? Sure.
So Ifscapes 1, and this will be slightly different from 2 and 3, is mostly, I call it metamyth because it's myth that refers to itself or makes comments about itself and also looks beyond. So it goes a bunch of different directions at once, but it is one plot. It is intended to be cohesive, coherent. And a lot of the thing about Ifscapes is, if you read the introduction, you see that I quote from Albert Einstein where he comments on how physics works. And he says, in physics, there isn't actually a sense of past, present, and future. What we have is basically an illusion that helps us to make sense of things. And it's actually a very biblical way of looking at time because God sees everything at once and we see past, present, future. Well, what Ifscapes does, especially with the metamyth, is it brings together all of those ideas of past, present, and future and says, well, what would be if you had a Roman legionary who sees a television screen with something with Cleopatra on it?
Yeah.
And you probably saw, why are these legionaries there in the first place? Well, there is a very definite reason. And it has to do with something that has to do with their timeline that affects all these others. So there's always a ripple effect.
There's something going on there.
Yes. And I always like to write stories that, especially if they're supposed to have satirical sides, which inevitably they probably do, I like ones that when I reread, they make me smile.
Yeah.
Whether for a serious reason or a funny reason. And that one was so much fun to write with all the strange foods you could come up with and all the characters. Yeah. So that was a lot of fun.
I honestly, I'm just getting started, but I don't know how you came up with all that scenario with all these different factions and timelines interacting with one another. Do you mind if I read the table of contents for that first one? First one here is, a funny thing happened on the way to the Empire. The way the androids tell it. Would the real
Aeneas.
I'll
have a story for that one.
Okay. Don't forget that one. Aeneas, please stand up. Palamedes. Well, see, I'm being schooled here.
But the beautiful thing is, it doesn't matter. It's science fiction. You can approach it without that.
Well, I do want to try to pronounce it right. I'm a perfectionist. I want to get it right. So yeah, help me out here on these. CTF, temporal agent, Odysseus objective,
yeah. So that one has to do with the Trojan War and time travel gone wrong.
But who was Homer on the path of the transmogriffin?
Transmogriffin? Oh.
Okay, see, some of these terms I'm not even familiar with.
I made that up. You shouldn't be familiar with it. So.
Rescuing Icarus. Merchant's Monument. Reverie at Troy. Now, see, that should be something that everyone should be familiar with. Ovid's Cosmogony and the Four Ages. Okay, Mad Scientist. Rome Reprogrammed.
That's one of my favorites. I'll give you a spoiler on that one. Okay. That one really is great. Yeah, I enjoy it. It's great because I think it's funny.
Okay. Well, that kind of gives you an idea of the fun that this first one will be. Not that the other ones won't be fun. It's just that I've started it, so I'm kind of familiar with, the way you've written it and the complexity of it. And you can tell by these titles that it will be very enjoyable.
Well, the thing about Ifscapes, before you move on from that, most of those are inspired by actual mythology. So they take a character, they take a name, they take a passage, and they turn it completely on their head. And for instance, the Would the Real Aeneas Please Stand Up is actually linked to where Ifscapes came from. And that's my dissertation in exercises in what you call contrary to fact conditions, where you have what would happen, a CTF is if someone in a story comes in, or a history, we do this in English all the time. If X had happened, Y would have happened, or wouldn't have happened. If it had been raining, he would have gone to the park, or the other way around. If it hadn't been raining, he would have gone to the park. But those are CTF scenarios. And in ancient Greek narrative, there are a lot of times those occur, and we tend to look at them and say, well, it doesn't mean anything. It's just this simple little condition. But obviously, there are alternative outcomes, and I'm saying these are linked to alternative worlds. And so part of what Ifscapes was taking questions from the dissertation, and would the real Aeneas please stand up, comes out of a very specific set of times. Aeneas almost dies 3 times in a really well-known epic called the Aeneid. And these, we talk about classical history. The founding fathers would have known who these people were, which I love, because it's the same stuff they were reading with a completely different spin, I hope.
Wow, exactly. I would highly suggest looking this up on Amazon, right?
Amazon Kindle.
Okay. Now, are you ever going to put this in hardbound copy?
I hope to at some point, yes.
Okay. I know my daughters love having the book. They like the feel of it. They like turning the pages. They're okay doing it digitally, but they'll pay money for a real book. So get on that really quick. You can make a lot of money.
Well, the next step hopefully is to do that. And this is an expansive series. So I actually have number 4 coming out later this year too. So it just keeps growing. Get
it done digitally first, and then, do the hard copy later for those die-hard, what do they call them? Antiquities or?
Antiquaries section, yeah.
Those are my kids.
I'm not sure. It isn't me too sometimes.
Okay. You can get that on Amazon, and all 3 books are there. What year did this one come out, the first one?
That was 2020, February 29, although Amazon has it as February 28, which is too bad.
Wow.
It would have been perfect for Leap Day.
Yeah, and you had actually had this going on in your mind when you were studying at Yale, is that correct?
Yes, this is all born out of the dissertation.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, and you caught the drop there, maybe the CTF, contrary to fact, the CTF temporal agent. That's not in the book, so that's one of the Easter egg things. But in the title of that story, the CTF agency, he's dealing with contrafactuals.
Okay. Wow. Okay, better jump on that, folks. All right, and the second one in the series is called a Braxleydale, scholar, and other eccentricities. And it is part of the Ifscapes collection of out-of-this-world erudition. Okay, now, on this one, this is a different one.
It is.
They're not connected, but can you give us, actually, go ahead.
They're all part of the same Ifscapes multiverse. Okay. So they're all part of the contingent universes that unfold. So in that sense, I connect them all.
Okay.
The theme of this one, erudition, scholar, there's a lot of satire in this one, but it's very serious reading too, because it touches on issues that are considered really intellectual things right now, like singularities and sentience and things that I look at as a science fiction reader, and just plug into that and say, well, what would happen if, for instance, a cookie became sentient? Cookies enabled. That's what that story is all about.
Whoa.
But it has a very, very serious undertone if you're willing to take it that way, or a very comical one if you take it that way. Science fiction is often social commentary, the best type.
I hope the cookies do not become sentient.
I will leave that to you. You can discover that.
Starve. Because I wouldn't be able to eat that cookie. I really wouldn't. Okay, so let's not let that happen. Let's keep it in that verse, that universe. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Now, is there anything else you can tell us? It's hard to summarize what this is about without giving away the plot. Is that even possible?
I think so. The thing about Ifscapes is it is, like I say, a universe, a multiverse. So the idea of multiverse in popular parlance now is that there are multiple universes they're connected to each other somehow in one way or another. And if is really the hinge point for a lot of these. So they're connected in that sense. And what I hope they do is encourage people to think of reality with a slightly disorienting way, a slightly challenging way, And, we talked about in episode 1 needing to have a firm reality. And I hope in many ways that as fun as these are, and I hope as fun as they are for everyone else, I have fun writing them. So hopefully that shows. And as serious as some of them are, that what they should do is encourage people to look at it and say, well, what is reality? Because there is an overriding reality. It's an objective one. And again, it points back to God and the truth of the Bible. So I would say there are several ways you can summarize it. And the eccentricities all revolve around that sense, and hence Ifscapes.
Wow. Okay, now I'm going to read the table of contents, and if I mispronounce a word, you'll correct me, obviously. A Axleydale scholar, that's the first one. A fascination with shiny rocks. Third is Earthland. 4 is the cybernetic settler. A letter from the event horizon. Moving the wormhole. Cookies enabled. As paper boats. The aliens gatekeeper. And the last one is Rate Your Planet Building Kit. Okay, those are all very intriguing, very interesting, and now I'm curious. So we're going to have to read it to find out what all that's about. Because she's not going to tell you the plot. Okay? Is there anything else you want to tell the folks about that particular
that volume? I hear a lot from people who are interested in black holes and wormholes and time travel, which are all interests of mine, that they enjoy that volume quite a bit. Okay. For that reason, because there's a lot of those.
I like time travel a lot. It's a very intriguing subject.
I think it shows up in all 3 of them, but number 2 has a lot of them. So
that's what keeps you going. Okay, now this third one in the series, now this one just came out recently, and we were actually going to try to do a podcast prior to this coming out, and things just didn't work out. So this is like past history here. But this one's called A Many-Turning Multiverse. Okay. Now, what was the date, and how did you come up with that particular title?
So this one, again, is August 12th. And I think, again, Amazon backdates a lot of them. So August 11th. This one, A Many-Turning Multiverse, is also a pun. This goes back to some of the metamythology. This has a lot more of the mythological characters. Again, some passages. It's completely accessible, or designed to be, to anyone who has read mythology or has not. But many-turning is explained in the introduction as a pun. That the character Odysseus in the ancient mythology is associated with the idea of thinking and being very cunning. And one of the things said about him is he's polytropos, which means many-turning. Literally many-turning. Well, that means he turns things over in his mind. He's cunning. He thinks things through. There are a lot of different nuances to that. Well, the word multiverse comes from 2 word roots. One is multiple, meaning many, numerous, and the other is verse, which means turning. So it actually is a pun on the same thing because it means many turning in itself. So hence a many-turning multiverse.
Wow. Okay. Now, is there anything you can tell the folks out there about the story plot without giving it away? Because we don't want to do that. We just want to, give them a little flavor. What's going on in this particular book?
This one turns a lot to a sense of worlds colliding, infiltrating, turning in one on the other. So there's a lot of the many-turning sense in there. If people are interested in how the multiverse is coming in popular culture, then this is an approach that they may recognize. This is something that obviously carries over from 2020 with the earlier Ifscapes. I connect it a lot to my earlier research. Okay. But a many-turning multiverse has a lot of the plays that occur on universes that touch each other and intentional touches on each other too.
Okay. All right. That's good enough.
That's where I'll leave it. So
yeah. Okay. So we have these 3 books in the series. You can get them on Amazon, and they're not expensive. You can get them. They're very accessible. And start reading these. They're a lot of fun. I know the first one is so far, and from what you've told me about number 2 and number 3, it sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun. For me, I try to imagine if somebody were to make a movie series, well, not a series, but, made a movie out of each of these, it would be a tough one to pull off, wouldn't it?
I think it would be a fun one, but that's because I enjoy writing it so much. I see a lot of these pictures of what that city would look like and think, oh, you could have so much fun with the things you just make up.
Yeah.
Titanium quarried rock candy, things like that. What color is it? What does it look like? There's a lot of room for imagination in that.
Oh, the graphics engineers, they'd have to pay them high dollar to pull this one off.
Well, hopefully, if they did it simply, they'd enjoy doing it because it also harkens back to past history, like
There
you
you
said,
go.
so you can throw all of it in together.
Okay, now before we conclude this episode on your 3-book project series, remind the folks again what your degrees are, because I don't think we mentioned this at the first of this episode. So,
okay, well, starting here locally, I have an AA in English, and then my BAs from KU are in classical languages and antiquity. I got my master's in classics from KU, and then most recently is my PhD from Yale in classical philology. That's classics with a special interest in language and literature of the ancient world, conveniently enough.
which works out very appropriately for the books that you're writing.
It really does.
Throwing it all together. And before we wrap it up, I do want to read the contents of the third one, just to kind of give people an idea of what's going on there. Behind the doors of Daedalus.
That one has a lot of different pronunciations.
Daedalus. I like that one better.
Okay.
It's a lot less work. Invasion of the Romans. Fox Hunt. Shadowland of Earth. Please like and share. I'm sorry, that one got me.
Good.
Okay. Now,
I hope so.
please
It got me
like
too.
and share. Okay. Sisyphus.
Sisyphus?
Sisyphus on repeat. All Isles on Argus. The Song of Simichadas.
Simikidas. That one's a tricky one.
Simikidas?
Simikidas.
Simikidas, okay. Collaborative effort. Favator Fidelis.
That's good. Favator Fidelis. That one is a Latin title.
Okay.
It's basically referring to a fan fiction forum. Faithful fan.
End notes about the author. And the last one is other works in the Ifscapes multiverse. Okay. Wow. Very creative titles, let me tell you. So if the titles are that creative, you know that there's a lot of interesting content in each of these books. So we would like to encourage everyone to go ahead and get these and do some reading. It'll be a lot of fun. So we have Ifscapes, Empires and Androids, a Axleydale scholar, and a mini-turning multiverse. Okay? And get those by Dr. Polsley. All right, great.
And thank you for the opportunity.
All right. Well, thanks for telling us about what you have out there for us to read. All right. This is the conclusion of episode number 2, and this is Verity Seeker signing off.